All right, I think we got it. I think we got it. That's. Oops.
Are you guys gonna be ordering What are you guys doing this check? You guys tell me the direction you're going.
There we go.
You better start over there. Okay.
All right.
We've got video. I'm just warning you that you're a live video right now. So
We gotta get her name and her age and her address.
I can give you my name. My name is Sunshine. And they're taking care of you. Nice.
Sunshine.
Thank you. So, are you on your own?
yeah.
Okay.
Nobody's on their own. All the checks come to me. It'll be one big check.
Absolutely.
Then I might change my
Oh, yeah.
In that case,
Where's the more expensive? Give me the escargot. Yeah, the caviar.
I'm very tight with money. One of the reasons why Lola and I got along is because I'm.
He taught you that, didn't he?
He did. He taught me that. He taught me, lots of clenching with the fist exercises with pennies in there. And once they started leaking, then I knew, and he knew that I had gotten it down to the appropriate amount.
There's no carbs in there, right?
Not at all.
The weekend's coming though.
Cards.
I'll have the French toast platter.
How do you like your eggs cooked?
Over easy.
Bacon or sausage?
Bacon.
Next.
I like the grilled pork chops, Cajun grilled pork chops,
And your 2 sides.
fresh fruit and buttered corn. They're on the comfort classics.
I'd like the shrimp, whatever it's called, the jello shrimp.
Okay, your 2 sides.
Let's see, asparagus and. We didn't see what. The fruit. Okay, Randall.
Classic cheeseburger. Oh, I see.
Oh, you guys are going way too fast.
The senior ones on the back.
Leave a blank spot.
Barbecue burger.
Fries, okay?
Fries are fine.
There is. On
Yeah.
the back there, it's a 1 egg Benedict.
Yep.
Would you like hash browns or breakfast?
Hash browns, please.
All that's deadly.
Bacon or sausage?
Yeah. Give it the carb guy.
The low carb guy?
One egg, scrambled with bacon, and. Oh, yes. Good.
They were talking about low carb. The low carb.
All right, I
recipe.
saved you a spot.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the 55 plus country fried steak, that doesn't come with a side like a vegetable?
2 sides.
You're so good. Do you have green beans? I would like
Green beans with bacon, if that's okay.
Yes.
And you get 1 more side. Would you like maybe some mashed?
How about fruit? Oh, do I still get the mashed potatoes? Oh, how about the mashers?
Okay. So scratch the fruit? Or the green?
Or the green beans.
You can have my. I need the green beans. What? You can have.
So scratch the fruit. So let's do, are you okay with 2 sides?
They are related to steak
Build
and
a
wallace.
breakfast. We'll build breakfast.
Steak and wallace.
With hash browns.
17
Bacon,
days.
2 French toast.
Irish.
Oh, easy bacon, hash browns.
Executed for his
You're welcome. I'll be back shortly.
So wrong guy, wrong century, wrong country.
Wrong movie.
Wrong movie, everything.
Yeah, just the right name.
Just the last, okay. wrong.
Chasing those
There was
kids
still
around.
some discussion about whether it was Packers
That's a full-time job.
Wallace that was staking it, or really.
3.5 years.
William Wallace wasn't state.
No.
But maybe it was a different William Wallace, right?
Yeah. But most everybody knows after a couple of days.
So I have a report from Pam. I asked about it.
Yeah.
No? That's fine. They have to.
Yes.
I think he will tell you today is a good day. Usually every other day he rests all day. Because his good days Saturday. She's sewing Katie's Christmas gift and Phil Valor close Valor. And she's just made a comment, hope it was cool for the service.
It was.
Which, I'm supposed to get video of that.
There's
Got ready to do that, but Pastor said something to me, and I got distracted, and that was the end of it.
And she said, glad you chose.
Somebody said,
That's what
she was easy to distract first, very chatty.
You were trying to say we're.
Oh, yeah.
Something else.
I know that. Pretty well.
I think he was talking last week, somebody else.
No, Pam.
Oh, Pam, yes.
So many of the new ones are like
Pastor, that's the first time I met her.
Yeah.
But she said something to me, I was getting ready to take video,
That breaks
and
down.
she said
I
something
don't
to
know
me.
what do you do?
And I put my phone back in my pocket and answered, and that was it, that was bullshit.
I put a new spark plug in or something. and-
Yeah. Interestingly,
The suspension in the building, I mean, my gosh, you jump off
a second cousin,
everything else, you got a mobile, you have to press
a
back.
second cousin of ours is in her congregation.
Right,
Oh, they do everything.
About us.
They came across the lake on the water
Yeah.
even.
yeah,
That's
you were
great.
saying
I mean,
that,
what
small
a
world,
nice.
Yeah.
it's nice.
Then you do too.
The guy with Goat Street.
Yeah.
We'll just leave the goat story with the guy at the goat
They
story.
big paddles like, you know, they take on the mountains.
Yeah.
Well, just.
And I was watching
A
them,
goat
they tip back and they'll go like
and
this,
kids
right in the
and
water
bicycles.
like that. They'll take on the
Probably
boat
got
bus
that-
and
probably
come
already
across
know more
the
than
water
I should.
like
I've
that.
seen that.
Yeah. Kennard's,
Garbage is possible.
They have to go so fast to play slow
Yeah.
down.
for a lot of people, a lot of kids particularly, it was, everybody was a
snowmobile
favorite uncle.
No, I mean, they come right out of the water on the land and then they in that, the sand.
So does anybody have stories about Lowell?
Go and keep in the snow.
No, I haven't seen Lowell for a lot of years.
Go anywhere.
I think it's most likely
They'll do
because we live in
130,
Iowa,
140 miles an hour.
and when they came down,
Over, I make
they
it
usually mentioned where grandma lived.
Right. Right.
So the Eriksen brothers down
Surely
there,
talking about
like,
racing them, you know, going up
outdoor
north.
stories.
We'll see if
Have
there's-
Lowell stories?
I don't know where that was,
Yeah, but was everybody there?
this is March 15th. How can I help you?
You went to something with old.
Watch kids.
Yeah.
Really, it's.
Were they there when it passed the river?
They were there for the 50th anniversary, yeah.
I don't really work on that kind of stuff.
And they were there
And
for.
Judy was there too.
Judy was there, yeah. And they were there at
Why would you want to start over? I don't get it.
the.
They've been paying it for a long time.
Oh, really? Was it on books?
A lot of people that just can't resist little babies.
We kind of used to it.
I mean, I'm one of them, I put a stop at the 3, this week or Thursday. Tell the girl, she's got 2 boys.
Here we go.
You get Carl's or
So
Moland's.
Sean and Amanda got the twin girls.
What's that new one in town now?
I think they were.
I think Sean would be,
Good with that.
Hartman.
45.
Amanda kinda goes
46.
back and forth.
46.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So
I
I
just
was
kinda
back.
saw the big.
She went to have a boy and they met Adam.
You were a little
But
closer.
You bet.
they just have a handful of the twin girls.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And Drew and Katrina have got Dawson. He's 15 months old and they're ready to have another one. It's time.
He's all boy.
Oh, yeah.
He is all boy.
No, because Lowell and Keith, I don't know how they were when they were young.
So.
But Lowell and Keith did not like each other at all. They hated each other. Lowell was abusive. And once again, I don't know how Lowell was when, I don't know how he was when he was young, but he was very abusive to Keith. And he was a very brusque, hard to get along with individual in his, from the time that I met him. He didn't really, I wasn't. So, okay, I guess I'll start with the Lowell stuff. I'm starting with the Lowell stuff now.
Okay.
So everybody knows what I know about Lowell, and for those of you who don't know who I am, my name's Jay. I'm what people will say, well, you're just his friend, because I'm not a member of the family. But I met Lowell when I was 15 years old. I'm the oldest of 7 kids from a troubled single-family home, and I was so dirt poor that I had basically one pair of clothes to wear to school every single day, and it caused a lot of trouble for me. So in my junior year in high school, I got into a fight, and it wasn't because I was trying to get into a fight. I tried to keep my head down, but I was hit from behind. One of the football players in the high school there, big guy, just came up and hit me in the back of the head. And when that happened, because, you know, I was a little guy, I hit the ground, and the way I would fight as a little guy is I would use whatever was on hand to beat whoever it was that was attacking me. And in this case, there was a brick on the ground, and I picked that up and I beat that guy bad with that brick. And as a result of that, I was arrested. Okay. But I didn't start it. In any case, what happened is that my attorney, after I was arrested and I went through that, my attorney said, well, Jay, you're 15, you're not quite 16 yet, so they're not going to charge you as an adult for this assault. So what you should do instead is divert. You should tell the judge that you're sorry, and they will divert you out of the normal criminal justice system and into some community service, and as long as you don't have any more problems for a couple of years, then they'll seal your record, and then that'll be the end of it. And I trusted him, and so that's what I did. So for my community service, I had to go to this community center called the Marshall Center, where there was this giant public swimming pool indoor, and it had these huge glass windows that were completely etched with chlorine. And my job was to polish those windows back to clear. Okay. Now, where Lowell comes in is that when I was 15, this was in 1979, he was a member of a group that played Dungeons and Dragons and games like that. And every Sunday, they would go to the Marshall Center. They had a room that they would play at the Marshall Center, Dungeons and Dragons and other games. And so one Sunday I'm busy polishing glass, and after a while it's time for a break, and you know, I don't have anything to do. I'm just hanging out there. So I'm wandering around and I'm curious, I'm looking around to see what's going on, and I look in this room, and these guys I love games, and I always have, but Monopoly, Sorry, those kind of things, those I knew, but this was something at a totally different level. These giant maps that they had on the floor, that were huge maps with tanks and whatnot on them, and there's 15 or so guys around this giant map with moving these tanks around, and there's board games I've never seen in my life, and in the back corner was a big round table with 9 or 10 guys, and they were all talking, and I didn't know what any of that was. So I walk into the room, and my eyes are wide, and I'm looking around, and people are mostly ignoring me, and a couple of people say hi, you know, and I get up to this big round table, and there's a couple of older guys, mostly they're kids, teenagers, but there's a couple of older guys, an older guy with black hair, bald, black hair, and a black mustache on one side, opposite of where I'm at, and then on the same side of the table that I was at, facing away from me, was another older guy, bald, with red hair and a beard. And I walk up to the table, and I just am looking, and the red-headed guy turns and looks at me, and he says, "Who the hell are you, and what the hell are you doing here?" And that was my introduction to Lowell. That was my introduction to Lowell. And he got more obnoxious as time went on. he set his mind, and it usually wasn't a pleasant thought, he didn't really enjoy the company of people that he didn't know, and frankly, he didn't enjoy the company of most of the people that he did know. And he was very easy at telling you to stay away or get out of his face or whatever. He just was not happy with you being around. At least that's the way it seemed. But as time went on, because I was so interested in what they were doing there, I kept going back. And as time went on, and Lowell got to abuse me some more, and I got to learn a little more about him and realize that crust was pretty deep and those porcupine quills were pretty long. There was also, I found something underneath all of that. And at first it didn't really, I didn't really see it. But what happened is, after a few months had passed, he comes up to me and he says, "Hey Jay, I need some help at my house, and if you need some work, I'd be happy to pay you." And it was in the summer, and he's talking about yard work, and I thought, I could sure use another pair of pants, because I only have one pair of pants.
And some more abuse.
And some more abuse, but I'm an easygoing guy. So I said, okay. He says, well, here's what I'm going to have you dig some holes for me in my yard. I'll pay you $20 an hour. Now this is in 1979. And I thought to myself, wow, this guy's got bucks. So I went to Lowell's house, which wasn't very far from my house. It was 2.5 or 3 miles. I would walk there. I walked to his house, and he says, okay, I'm glad you're here. He hands me a shovel and a postal digger and some gloves, and he says, right here, and he shows me this spot in a corner of his house. He says, right here, I want you to dig a hole. It needs to be 3 feet across and 6 feet deep.
Wow. Who are you gonna bury there? Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Me, I guess, because, it's 6 feet. It's right at the top of my head. So I said, okay, that's fine. So I start digging, and I spend 4 or 5 hours digging this hole. And then when it's deep enough for him, then I move all of the material out to the field that was behind his house that was left over. And he says, okay, good, you got the first one done. Now you need to dig another hole like that over here. So I dig a second hole, same thing. I spend the rest of the day working on part of it. I come back, in a day or two, dig some more. A few days later, come back and dig a third hole. And when all 3 holes are dug, then he says, okay, great. Now what you need to do is, in my driveway, you see that giant pile of rocks? And there was a giant pile of rocks and a giant pile of gravel. I said, yeah. He says, all right, you need to take all of those rocks and you need to fill each of these holes halfway with the rocks that are there. So I get the wheelbarrow and I get the shovel and I start filling the wheelbarrow with rocks, and I fill each hole halfway with rocks. And that takes me a while because, these are river rocks, and that is one heavy wheelbarrow for each trip. And even to fill up 3 feet of that is several trips. So once it's down enough, he tells me to get down in there and jump up and down on those rocks. And I do, okay. Put a few more rocks in, okay. Then he says, all right, now the rocks are in. Now you need to put all that gravel there, you need to put in these holes. And I want it filled up to the top. Okay. So I go back and I fill up the wheelbarrow with gravel, and I do the same thing. And I'm going back and forth, and it takes me the rest of the day or maybe another partial day. I think I ended up with all of the hole digging and everything 4 or 5 days of work at $20 an hour for 8 hours. And I thought to myself, I'm making some good money here. I was really happy about that. Well, if you know anything about Lowell and the Eriksens, they're super cheap. And I didn't understand until later, that actually he was being super cheap then too, because you see, the thing is that he is having a real problem with flooding. And he called a company to come out and put in a French drain for him, and they were going to charge him $2,500. So instead, he paid me $20 an hour and got it done for $300, I think it was. So substantially less, a fifth of the price, because he hired me. But that was only the first thing about Lowell. The whole time when I was working, he didn't really talk to me. What he was doing was sitting on his back patio, drinking rum, and reading his paperback book. That's what he did. he would sit on his back patio and drink rum and read his paperback book. He wasn't really interested in talking to me. When he get hungry, Lowell's favorite food, by the way, if you don't know, does anybody know what Lowell's favorite food is? You'll never guess. Lowell's favorite food is raisin toast with peanut butter.
Oh, yummy.
Or anything with mustard. If it has mustard on it, he'll eat it. If it's raisin toast with peanut butter, he'll eat that. And then occasionally he'll eat a banana. And that was what, in his house, if he wasn't going out to eat, that was basically the food he had in his house. Was bananas and raisin bread and peanut butter and mustard in case something happened. So in any case, along with that, then maybe, I don't know, 6-8 months later, we got to know each other a little better. I became very close friends with the other older gentleman there, and who subsequently passed not long after that, was killed in a car accident. But Lowell, at one of our little gatherings, said to me, "Hey Jay, I've got this Apple II Plus computer at home, and I need somebody to help program some things into it." And at that point in time, I was really interested in computers. I mean, you know, I think I was 16 then, finally. And I was excited about that. So I went to his house, and he had talked the Vancouver School District into buying 150 of these Apple II Plus computers, and he had one at his house to create some educational software. So he had a book on programming. He gave me the book. He said, "All right, here's the book. Figure out what to do. I need you to write me 2 math programs." And he showed me some basic stuff, so I had an understanding of at least kind of the structure of what it was that I was doing, and then I had the book. And I'm a smart guy. I was a smart kid, and so I picked that up, and there was some programs in the back. I looked at, kind of see how things were going, and I did. I ended up writing a couple of programs for him. He took those to the school district, and so the couple of simple math programs that they used at the school district, I wrote on Lowell's behalf, and he presented them for the credit. Because, you know, that's how that works,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which was okay. Because of that, though, one of Lowell's friends, and he didn't have very many friends, but one of his friends from work, his name was Russ Chirac, he talked Russ into hiring me to do maintenance on all those computers. Now, I didn't know that Lowell had done this, but he did it. One day, Lowell calls me on the phone and he says, "Hey, if you're looking for some work, I've got a job for you with the Vancouver School District." Now, of course, I knew at that point he was a 5th grade school teacher. And one of the guys that played Dungeons and Dragons and all the gaming with them had been one of his students, and, you know, would tell horror stories. Mostly that was just about Lowell being a disciplinarian, you know, required basically a pretty high standard of discipline from his students. And yeah, that guy didn't like that too much, but I'm sure that later on in life he appreciated it more. In any case, I went down to the Vancouver School District administration building, which was quite a ways away, but, you know, once again, I'm dirt poor, no car at 16, so I just walked there, and Russ meets me, and he says, "Well, Jay, Lowell said that you're a hard worker and you're pretty smart and that you understand about these Apple II Plus computers," which I did, because Lowell showed me some basic stuff, and then I learned the programming out of the book and the use of the computer over time just from trial and error. So they hired me on the spot for $4.50 an hour. And that was 1980. So $4.50 an hour in 1980, which to me was amazing. Now, this was great in some ways, but horrible in other ways. The first thing is that for the first time in my life, I've got some income that I've never had before. But as I said, I'm the oldest kid of 7, and from a broken family. My mom, when my mom and dad separated, we moved, and then she locked herself in her room, and that was it. She only come out for church or to go grocery shopping. So our income wasn't from her work, it was from the state. So we had nothing. The problem was, since I was working, the state took all of my wages.
What?
Cause you were a defense.
Yes. So the state took all of my wages to help pay for the support that the state was providing the family. And that was, I mean, I didn't like that because I'd never had a job before and I wanted some of that money for myself, even some of it, but I was not getting any of it. Okay.
It's not fair.
Not fair, but it's what it was. So the good news is I have a job. The bad news is I'm not getting paid. Well, some of the money, I was getting some money under the table because I was doing maintenance off the books. So I was maintaining these computers along with working on the programming part. I was doing some maintenance. Lowell got me this little side job when he realized I wasn't getting any money. He got me this little side job, so I was getting some pocket money. And as soon as I got my first wad of cash, he said, "Get in the car." And I said, "What?" He says, "Get in the car." So okay, so I get in the car, and he drives me down to the local teachers credit union, and he gives me a bank account, and he has me give all of my money to him, and he puts all of my money in the bank. And it's like, I don't have any money now. And he says, "Wait a minute. Here's why." And for the next several days, he spent explaining to me about the power of saving money. How important it is to start saving early, because later in life, what's small going in becomes big coming out. And all of the important things about how to keep track of your money and how much you should be saving and whether you should be spending and to be thinking about spending and blah, blah, blah. It went on and on and on. And I just sucked all that up. And Lowell was a teacher, and he was good at teaching. He would not let me interrupt him. If I started to say something, he would tell me to shut up. In very different, colorful ways. But I got the point, and as time went on, I became appreciative of the fact that not only did he show me that I could work and that I could earn a wage, but that there was value to that beyond finding money, spending money on a new pair of pants or whatever. And although I did eventually buy a new pair of pants, it wasn't right then. So Lowell taught me through his brusque, difficult, irritating, hard to get along with, stubborn as all hell manner, the value of hard work and the importance of saving and about finance and about investing. And along with that, he taught me how important it is to share your understanding of those things with other people. Because although he never really said it, that's what he was doing, was he was giving me important life information that I wasn't getting from anywhere else. And he knew that. He knew what it was that I was up against when I walked in the door that first time. And although he never talked to me about it, he realized, how important those things were going to be to me later on in life.
That's amazing.
So,
Leon, I'm just gonna interject this. Leon had that same Howard occurrence. I mean, when we first met him.
he was the
He
same.
like that.
Leon was the same way.
Exactly.
And was the
And
same
that's
way to
where-
me the first time I
that's
met
where-
him.
That's where Lowell would have learned that.
I believe it.
Keith did not learn that.
Keith was not like that at all. Keith was the
He
opposite of that.
He rejected that, yeah.
So, in any case, what Lowell gave me was something I could never in my life repay. Ever. Can't repay that. He changed my life in such a positive way without displaying anything, saying he was doing it. There was nothing like that. He did it sly, behind the scenes, behind this wall of just nasty, rude, stubborn, porcupine-y personality. Which, that by the way, also changed later on. Not completely, but it did. So as time passed, and Lowell and I became closer friends, our dear friend Mike Carr, who was the older guy that I was talking about, there in the first place. He passed. He was killed in a car accident. Lowell didn't really have many fans because he was really hard to deal with at his face. But we got closer, and then we started doing some things together. He would, he liked to travel. He'd talk about his travel. He was always berating me because I didn't have a passport. Well, of course I didn't have a passport. I didn't have $2 or a dollar. I didn't have 10 cents. What am I gonna do with a passport? You never can tell. Well, I got my passport. He's always berating me that I've never been out. Well, Jay's never been out of the United States. Tell everybody that Jay's never been out of the United States. Of course, he's driving me to other things, is what he's doing. But he's doing it in a way that's basically a public ridicule of me. And at that point, I kind of understood what he was trying to do, and I tolerated it. But it was irritating, and I basically told him, why don't you just take that and put it someplace else? And he took that pretty well. So, in any case, he would go to Costa Rica. That, by the way, Costa Rica was Lowell's favorite country. And while he's in Costa Rica, his favorite thing to do was go to the beach and drink a Coca Loco and read his book.
It's got rum in it, right?
Well, Coca Loco is a fresh coconut, so it's big and green, about this big. They take a machete and chop the top off so that the coconut inside is open. And then in the coconut water, they pour whatever alcohol they happen to have on hand until it's full. That's a Coca Loco. Then they put a couple of straws in it. So he would go to the beach and read his book and drink Coca Loco. And when he was home, he'd go to his back porch and read his book and drink Cockspur rum on his lawn chair. And pretend, maybe, well, he really liked rum. So I think if he could have got that rum where he was at in Costa Rica. Now, he was a scuba diver. You guys know he was a skier. He did enjoy those kinds of things. He had an accident skiing not long after I met him, and basically he stopped skiing. And the scuba he stopped when he was in his 40s because skiing, a regular scuba causes bone density problems. Nitrogen will get into your bones over time, and it will cause a weakness of your bones, just like some other bone diseases do. And he stopped so that he did not develop those problems. So, but he would
water skiing or snow skiing?
Snow skiing. He wasn't a water skiing guy, but he loved to snow ski and was a member of a local snow ski club, and ran the Apple Computer Club and the chess club for the kids. And so in any case, I'm getting too far into this. But I guess what I'm after here, I wanted to say mainly, is that a lot of people thought that Lowell was an asshole. And he was. But beneath the asshole-ish exterior was something maybe some of you saw more of that of, and that was that he really had a good heart. He was a really good man. And although it hurt him towards the end of his life, that goodness, I would never deny it, and I would never tell him not to do the things he did, because, he enriched a lot of people's lives. Now, when Lowell was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, he had just retired from teaching. He was 55, I think he was 55. And they diagnosed him with Parkinson's. Now, he already had diabetes. But once he was diagnosed with Parkinson's, that really took hold of him pretty fast and hard. And it wasn't very long after that before I realized that he's just staying at home. He's retired. He's not going anywhere. He's sitting at his house and doing nothing. And something had to happen. And also, at that point, Lowell, he's a bachelor. He's never had a girlfriend there's a possibility of there was a person that he might have had interest in once upon a time, but that never worked out because she was just as prickly and as stubborn and as hard to deal with as he was. And I don't think he was willing to tolerate his own personality in someone else. So he's at home, and he knows that he's got diabetes and he's insulin dependent. So he goes to IHOP for breakfast every day, and eats pancakes. That's his breakfast with sugar-free syrup. Someone said earlier that he liked Mountain Dew, but he wasn't a Mountain Dew guy. Instead, what he liked was diet, caffeine-free Coca-Cola. That was his thing. Out of a 2-liter bottle, he drank a lot of that. And he thought that was okay for his diabetes. And then for lunch, he would go to Subway and get a Subway sandwich. And then for dinner, he would go to Subway and get a Subway sandwich. So lots of carbohydrates, which is the opposite of what you want when you're diabetic. He didn't do a good job of maintaining his medication, and he started having real problems. So what I decided to do was get him to my house for dinner twice a week and on holidays. And Keith came down a few times with Joni to my place during some of those holidays. And then Lowell would have a good meal. So at least twice a week, Lowell was getting some kind of food that was good for him for his diabetes. And so he...
Were you living,
I was living in Vancouver, about 3 miles away from him.
so you had a job, you weren't still at home?
Well, at that point, this is many years later.
Okay.
So I met him when I was 15, so I guess he would have been 35. And he's 55. So we've had a lot of things happen in our lives between then. Some people know or heard that he got involved with restaurants with me. Did anybody hear about that? Restaurants. So I had restaurants in Vancouver, and Lowell, he loved money more than anything. And I'm making tons and tons of money out of this restaurant that I have, and Lowell is excited for that. So reluctantly, I said, well, let's buy another one together in this next door town, and I'll show you everything you need to do. It'll be your place, but we'll put the restaurant name on it so people know, because my restaurant was established, and we'll put my name on it, but it's your restaurant, and then we'll operate it together. And I always try to help my family, and at that point in time, I felt like Lowell was my family. Now we're backing up quite a few years, because now I'm in my 20s. I think I'm 25 at this point. So it's 10 years later. And so Lowell likes that idea. When it comes time to purchase the restaurant, he wants me to buy it. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And he says, well, you're putting your restaurant name on it. And I said, well, I tell you what, why don't you put the money up, and we'll write up some paperwork that says, if you want out, a contract, if you want out, then I will take it over, and we'll use the restaurant stuff as collateral, because we're going to buy it, and you can use the restaurant as collateral. So he goes to his attorney, and he gets something written up. Now, I, at this point in my life, trusted Lowell implicitly. I knew that he was not going to do anything to cause me harm. At least I thought that. So he goes to his attorney and has this contract written up, and because I trusted him, I didn't read it, I just signed it, and that was it. And everything was fine for about a year. The second restaurant was not doing nearly as well as the first one, but it takes time for things to get going. But eventually it was picking up, and then I started having problems with my first wife. Serious problems where she got pregnant by one of my employees, and she was robbing the till every night. We weren't incorporated, it was a sole proprietorship, so now I'm getting divorced. And as soon as that divorce word came out, Lowell freaks out, and he wants his money back out of the whole venture. And he pulls out the contract and he says, Jay, this restaurant here, you're either going to pay me this money, or this restaurant here and the first one are mine. Yeah, which really freaked me out, because I was understanding that we were including the restaurant as collateral, but he didn't mean the restaurant we were buying. He meant the restaurant that I already had. So misunderstanding. It went all down in flames. He got most of his money back. It wasn't that he lost anything, but he was irritated about that for a long time. But you know, the restaurant closed because of my wife, and it didn't have anything to do with the two of us. And our friendship, even though we were in business together, continued. And I decided at that point, everybody, what they say is true. Don't ever go into business with friends or family. Okay, so fast forward, now he's 55 and he's retired as a teacher, and he's having this problem, and now I'm in the real estate business. I'm flipping houses. This is before flipping was a thing, really. And once again, I'm making a lot of money, and Lowell is really excited about the money I'm making in real estate. And I didn't let him get involved in my flipping, but I knew that he needed something to do. So I sold him a fourplex. I bought the fourplex, I renovated the whole thing, I put tenants in it, and then I sold it to him for half price. And then there was a vacant lot I owned right next door to that, and I gave him the vacant lot. Because I knew, as a landlord, he's going to be up there fixing stuff every day. And it's going to be good for him to get him out of his house and be busy and occupied. I wasn't really thinking so much about the Parkinson's, but I really wanted to make sure that he was active because he was getting older, and I felt like if he wasn't active, he was going to be in trouble. So Lowell did his normal thing. What happened is that when he started having problems with the tenants and needing to do repairs, he found some kids, some boys, teenage boys, and he got these teenage boys to go up there to where the fourplex was, and he taught them what to do for repairs, and he showed them how to, maintain them, and all this. So he's helping these kids out. What we didn't know, at this point, Keith and I are talking a lot about Lowell because he's really, showing a lot of signs of the problems with Parkinson's in his driving. What we didn't know was that combination of Parkinson's and diabetes had done something to his brain where he started to be very susceptible to suggestion. And one of these boys discovered that if he asked Lowell for money, Lowell would give it to him. Now that wasn't the way Lowell was. Lowell was tight-fisted. He would not give money to anybody for any reason without some blood on the table. But he was giving money to this boy to fix his car, buy a new car, put a special engine in the car, put new tires and wheels, buy a different car. I didn't understand what was happening until maybe a year had passed when I was at Lowell's house and he got a phone call from an investor. Now, Lowell, in all the time he was talking to me about finance, he always made it very clear, you never put your money in oil wells or gas wells or gold mines or anything like that, because that's a waste of your cash. You're just going to lose your money. But this guy calls and wants Lowell to put money into some gas fracking. And what does Lowell do? He says, okay. And he gives the guy his card information. I thought to myself, wait a minute. I asked him about it. And he says, no, this is a good deal. I'm going to make a lot of money. I said, Lowell, you always told me gas, oil, gold, that's all a waste of your money. You taught me that. And he said, well, this is different. And I said, well, what other things have you put money in? And he says, well, there's this windmill that has a special turbine on the top. It's not the big blades. It's safer for birds. And I'm going to make a lot of money on this. And I said, how much money do you have in this? And he told me. I said, how much money have they given you? And he says, well, they keep calling me for more money because it's in development. I said, what else? And he says, well, there's this guy that is making a special semi-submersible boat in Hawaii, and it's going to make me a lot of money for tourism. And I said, are you making money, or are you? No, I've had to give them, so much money. So I realized now something's really wrong. I said, who else have you given money to? And he said, well, nobody except so-and-so, the boy. And I said, well, how much money have you given to him? And he says, I think it's about $80,000. Oh. I said, Lowell, how much money do you have in your bank account? Now, the last time Lowell and I talked about, here, okay?
Would you like another iced tea? It was on Are you using card? I have something back here.
That's fine, that's fine.
Would you like another?
The last time I saw Lowell's banking accounting information, I was with Keith. Keith and I were there visiting Lowell, and Lowell was talking about something he was doing, and Keith was helping him in Fidelity. And you know, Lowell always badmouthed Keith. He was rude to him when Keith was there. He's calling him stupid and you're an idiot and what the hell do you think you're doing? And he was always really hard on him. But when Keith wasn't there, Lowell was the opposite. He was saying, Keith is the smartest guy I've ever met. Who, you know, his investing skills are so much better than mine. And when if you gave him $100 in a month, he'd have that to 1,000. In a year, he'd have it to 10. And he would go on and on and on about the amazing things Keith could do with cash. And if you knew Lowell, you'd know how important that was to him. Keith was like the gold standard of investors in Lowell's eyes, to his back. But to his face, right, they just had this thing. So Lowell opened up his Fidelity account where most of his money was. And last time I saw it, it was at about $300,000. And now it was down to 54. 54,000 from 300. Because he'd given 80,000 to this kid and then spent another 200 something or close to 200,000 in all these crazy investments. So when I saw that, I got Keith on the phone right away and I said, Keith, you need to come down here. And Keith came down and I said, Lowell, listen, right now you've lost quite a lot of your savings and Keith is going to get your savings back to where they need to be. And Lowell believed that because Keith was a god when it came to money, as far as Lowell was concerned. So when Keith saw what was left out of Lowell's bank account, he freaked out because we had just put Lowell into a care facility. Now, I can get into what happened with that, but at the end of the day, we had to trick Lowell into going in there. He fell and hit his face in the tub, and when he went to the hospital for the fall, I had the doctor tell him that he's not allowed to drive anymore and that he needs to go into a care facility to recover from his fall. Okay? And Lowell was not into that whatsoever. But they did get his license away. The doctor said you can't drive anymore. They did get his license because the doctor told him he was going to tell the DMV to cancel his driver's license. He can't really do that, but he told him. And then the care facility thing, we had to find him a place that was the same size as his house because he didn't want to lose any of his stuff. He wanted it all there. And he was going back to his house in 2 weeks. Right? So he got him into this care facility, 3 bedrooms, 1,100 square feet, top corner floor in this big care facility, okay? Now, Lowell has got $50-something thousand in his investment account and another 11 or 12 in his primary account. So he's at about $70,000 total cash. And this place is $4,500 a month. So Keith and I say, we're going to have to do something to get some money into Lowell's accounts. We'll get into that, some other time. But at the end of the day, what happened is that we kind of moved Lowell from the big one to one that's not quite as big, to a place that's a little bit smaller, and down to something that was appropriate for him. But as it's going down in size, the cost is going up because his care needs were going up so fast at this place. And I didn't understand that either because it seemed like they were taking good care of him, but what was happening is that they weren't. It's all right. It's okay. Oh, really? Okay. We can do that. Don't. Stop saying sorry. Yeah, as soon as that's done. Okay, so Keith and I had a plan. Now at that point, I was still in real estate, but I was no longer flipping because it had been far enough past the mortgage downturn that the whole investing market was completely different from what I was used to. And so, but that was still our plan, was to start flipping houses again. And put that money into an account for Lowell to be able to maintain him in some semblance of decency. Because he didn't have any way otherwise. It was going to be too much. But the size of the rooms kept going down and the price kept going up because what was happening is these guys were ignoring his needs. He was in a big facility, very well talked about. It was beautiful. The rooms were great. If you were there because you just were older and you wanted to live in an adult facility where you could go to the pharmacy downstairs and you could still drive and that was okay. But if you really had any needs, they didn't do a good job. Lowell started screaming to them after he would push the button to get help to go to the toilet. 45 minutes goes by and he hasn't got help to go to the toilet. And he would start screaming at the top of his lungs to get help at this care facility. And I realized that because I heard him one day. I was going to visit and I heard him. It's like, what is that? And he's still on the upper floor and I'm going up the elevator and I can hear this guy screaming. And when I get there and I realize what's happening, then I start talking to the facility about it and realize that they're just too big. That's the problem. So we move him into a smaller place, but it's still a big place, and it's the same. And Lowell continues to deteriorate, and the room size is down, but the cost is up. Until we finally get him, he's a wreck. I think he doesn't have hardly any time left. He's in a wheelchair. He can barely move one hand. He can barely speak. His skin is all flaky. His eyes are sagging. He doesn't look at you in the face anymore. He's just kind of there physically, but his brain appears to be gone. And we put him finally into this little tiny place. They've got 6 rooms. It's like a house. And they're on-site care all the time. And the cost is outrageous. So we get him in there, and Keith and I are talking, and it's like, Keith, I don't know, we're going to keep him here for very long. We might have a year with what we've got. At this point, we've sold the fourplex, and we sold his house. Keith's his power of attorney. We sold it. We didn't tell Lowell. We just sold it. The fourplex. The house, when we were going to sell the house, Lowell, Keith wasn't Lowell's guardian. He was just power of attorney. And for this, Keith said, look, I have some other stuff to do. You need to take this power of attorney over. So I did. And we talked about selling the house to be able to support him until Social Security would cover the costs of his place. And so we went to sell the house, and the title company calls me and wants to know if I'm Lowell's guardian. I said, no, he doesn't have a guardian. He's going to sign for himself. And they said, well, we have a power of attorney that shows Keith. And I said, well, call him because he signed that over to me. So the title escrow officer calls Keith and asks, can Lowell sign for this sale of this house? And Keith says, well, it's no problem. Lowell's great. He has Alzheimer's, but it shouldn't be any problem to sign the house. Well, what Keith meant to say was Parkinson's. But he said Alzheimer's. And then he realized his mistake. He said, wait, no, not Alzheimer's. He got Parkinson's. But as soon as they heard Alzheimer's, now all of a sudden there's a big problem. Okay, we got through that. But right after that sale of the house, his rate goes up again. And it was a challenge, by the way, to sell it. I had to have attorneys involved and the doctors involved and threats of legal action against several title officers, several title companies, not just the one. But at that point, when Keith said Alzheimer's, I thought he just made a mistake. The next time he came down from Seattle, he says to me, Jay, I don't know how to go home. And I thought, this wasn't long after I had sustained a brain injury from a drug. And I was complaining to Keith about my lack of short-term memory. And he says to me, well, I don't know how to go home. And I said to him, Keith, I was thinking he's one-upping me. I said, Keith, you just get on the freeway and you go and you're going to know how to get home. So after our business with Lowell and trying to work on his finances a little bit, Keith drives back up to Seattle. It's a weekend. It's a Saturday. He gets back up to Seattle and he calls me and he says, Jay, I'm here in this neighborhood, but I don't know where I'm at. And I said, okay, listen, here's what you need to do. You have a lot of friends in the neighborhood where you live. Because I can't see where you are. You need to look at this corner sign, the street sign's there, and call one of your friends to come and have you follow them home. And then as soon as you get home, you need to have them take you right now to the hospital and get checked because something's wrong. So that's what happened. So he gets home, and this the person there, that one of the women in the neighborhood, this is after Dell had passed, and he was not interested in any other. Keith was not interested in any other women, but he had friends there in the neighborhood, and one of them took him in to the hospital, and that's when they discovered the brain cancer. And you guys know all about that. Okay, so as Keith is going down, Lowell's cash is going down fast, and Lowell's almost out of money when Keith passes. So, I mean, it was a blessing to Lowell of Keith's passing, but it was also, it was Keith's passing. And a couple of things that happened in that, during that end of, where I'm going with this for Keith, is that Keith told me, he was very clear that Lowell hated him. And it hurt him because he loved his brother. And he never understood why Lowell treated him the way he did. And so I told Keith about how Lowell always talked about how amazing he was with finance and how much Lowell looked up to him. Even though it was his little brother, he might not have said it to his face, but Lowell always looked up to Keith. He was very respectful of him and his abilities behind his back. And Keith never knew that. So my plan was to get Lowell and Keith together there at the end, because Lowell was going down too. Now, he's in this little place and he looks so bad. I'm thinking they're going to go within a few months of each other. But what happened was almost a miracle. This place, they started putting lotion on his skin. They made sure he was getting his medication on time. When his blood pressure wasn't quite right, they would get it adjusted. They were calling the doctor every day. And Lowell is, I'll tell you, I've never met a guy in my life who had weirder medical problems. His blood pressure is high, so they give him blood pressure medicine, and it gets down to normal, and then 3 days later his blood pressure is low. So they take him off the medication, and it goes down even lower. So they have to give him something to get his blood pressure back up, and then it goes high again. And they can't, it's like trying to balance this, it's like trying to balance an elephant on a moving ball. It just, it's so hard to keep it up there. But they eventually figured out something. And it wasn't just the blood pressure. It was a lot of different things. Okay? Because he has diabetes. His blood sugar. It does the same thing. You never know where it's going to be. He's insulin dependent, but his medication seems to change like almost every single day. He can't be on a regular regimen. Okay? And this place was totally on top of that. Totally on top of that. And within a month of being there, all of a sudden, he's looking around. He's bright-eyed. You can see the old guy back again. There's Lowell. I was like, I can't believe it. I thought he was done. But he wasn't done. He just needed somebody to actually give him some real help. Somebody to really care for him. Now, that's where the story kind of changes a little bit, because when Lowell got into this care facility, he hated the lady that ran it, because she's just like him, as stubborn and as difficult and as a porcupine as he was, and she wouldn't let him get away with shit, pardon my French. And he wanted to, he wanted to be able to get away with stuff, and she would not let him. She would not let him eat food he wasn't supposed to have. She would not let him skip his medication. She would not let him get away with putting the medication in his mouth and spitting it out later. Oh, no. He didn't want to brush his teeth. She would brush his teeth. He would bite the toothbrush so she couldn't brush his teeth. Okay, that's how he was. He was really, but the thing is that over time, although they were really, seemed like they were at odds, a relationship developed there that was very positive. And it got to the point where he wouldn't let anybody else help him. It had to be her. He wouldn't let anybody else get close to him. It had to be her. If there was nobody else around, he he would not do what he was supposed to do. He was like that spoiled brat kid who wants his cookie and is kicking and screaming on the floor if he doesn't get it. If she's not there, he's kicking and screaming in his wheelchair. Okay, that's how it was. But she took such amazing care of him. And all of a sudden, you see his personality coming back. And it wasn't the same. Although he was that way to her, after a while, he started being really nice to the other women in the facility. And there were 3 nurses there, CNAs, and 1 male nurse. He didn't like that guy at all. And he punched him a couple of times. Really, says, "Lowell, let me help you up." Pow! So the male nurse knew that he was, and I was worried about lawsuits. The male nurse knew that he was not to go close to Lowell because Lowell hated him for whatever reason. But the women would sit by him and talk to him and rub his shoulders, and boy, he loved that attention. And it got to the point where all of the hard, rough exterior kind of fell off. He stopped being that hard, rough guy, and he started being this really soft, marshmallowy guy. Really nice and sweet to everybody, not just to the girls. It kind of morphed into something different from what he had always been in my eyes, to this really nice, good man that I knew was really there at the heart of him, but I'd never seen it before. So at the end of his life, where he was at, everybody loved him.
That's what we know.
Everybody loved him. Everybody. And when it came time for Lowell to pass, they did battle with me because I knew that he had weeks left to live. And one of the things between Lowell and I, as he started getting towards the end of his life, is that I knew Lowell didn't want to die. But what I knew more than that was that he didn't want to experience death. And there's a difference. To have him awake and dying would have been his nightmare come true. Would have been his nightmare come true. And as his body's breaking down and he's not absorbing food anymore despite the feeding tube, and he has a wound on his back that's to the bone, and a wound on his ankle to the bone that's infected, and the infection is spreading and it's getting worse, and he's no longer really waking up anymore, and he has a heart attack, big heart attack, and a stroke. And they give him CPR and they break his sternum, and they bring him back. The doctors call me on the phone while they're doing this because Lowell made me swear that I would not allow them to let him die if he had a heart attack, that they would do everything in their power to bring him back. And I, am true to my word. So I did. I told them, you have to do this, and they did it. But it was heartbreaking to me. I knew that's what he wanted. But afterwards, he didn't come back out of that. He stayed in a coma. He was, and the doctor says, "Look, Jay, he's got days at most." I said, "He's not dying in the hospital, he's going home." They said, "He needs to be here for care." And I said, "I don't care about the care, you need to send him home." So he goes back to his care facility. Hospice, in order to do that, hospice got involved and they wouldn't let him go back on the feeding tube. And the care facility there, like they did before when we were trying to get the feeding tube in him, and I don't know if did I mention that about the feeding tube? I don't know if I said anything about that. When he had to have a feeding tube, the doctors wouldn't allow it. They said, feeding tube for someone who has Parkinson's and diabetes is contraindicated, that he is not going to live any longer with or without it. So it would be wrong to put it in. And I thought to myself, and I said to the doctor, "Doc, he needs a feeding tube because he's not getting any nutrients. So if you put the feeding tube, he's going to get nutrients, and that's going to extend his life." And the doctor says, "Well, studies say that it's not going to extend his life." And I said, "Send me the studies." Okay? Send me the studies. Show me. I'm not going to take your word for it. You need to prove this to me if you want me to not have that feeding tube. They did battle with me. and the care facility was back with me. We were together working on these doctors. They threatened to release him from the hospital if I insisted on this putting in the feeding tube. And I said to them, if you release him, your hospital is going to regret it. We will go after you for everything, and I will not stop on that. So they put in the feeding tube. The hospital nurse, the hospital doctor, hospice doctor, right after the feeding tube, and sorry guys, I didn't mean to back up on this. The hospice doctor calls me and says, right afterwards, Jay, you are such a son of a bitch. You are such an ass. Do you realize what you've done to this man? He is going to suffer for the next 3 months every minute because he has that feeding tube, and it's not going to do him any good. He's going to die in 3 months regardless of this, and you're torturing him, and you put him through this for nothing. And she went on and on and on. And I said, and then she says, and studies say that this is not going to help him. And I said, you never sent me those studies. And I hung up. So 3 months goes by. Lowell's doing great on his feeding tube. I take a picture. I put it in a card. I send it with balloons to the doctor. 6 months. I get another picture, another card with some more balloons, and I send it to the doctor. A year goes by. This is a few years prior. A year goes by. I take a picture. I send a card with some balloons to the doctor. After 2 years, I stopped. But for 2 years, I regularly sent her to let her know that she was being stupid. That you know, sometimes it's worth it for that feeding tube. So whether she, took that message to heart or not, I don't know. But in any case, the reason why I mentioned that is that
Sorry, I'm leaving for the day. Just
Okay.
wanted to let you guys know.
Thank you.
If you do need anything,
we'll go out.
John is gonna be,
Okay.
I'll have him come back and check with you.
Okay, that's great.
Just to see if you guys do okay. Fill your drinks all one here.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're good.
Thank you.
Thank you. So at the end of his life, it's this care facility that did battle with me against the hospital that's now attacking me because I don't want Lowell to be awake when he dies. And he's gonna die in the next few days no matter what.
During this extension of life because of the feeding tube, what was his quality of life?
It was good. It was good. He's at the table. He's alert. He has friends next to him. He's happy. He's talking. It wasn't that he was in a bed and not having anything. I would have been very sad if that would have been the case. I would have felt like it was a mistake. But that wasn't it. He had good quality of life, compared to what he had, because he was on a catheter and the feeding tube, and he can use one hand, and he can barely speak, and he can barely hear. But for all of that, he was happy with the people around him. He made that very clear. He was happy with his life. He still didn't want to die. He made that very clear. And I would ask him, Lowell, are you ready to go? No, emphatic no. So anyway, at the last week of his life, when they pulled the feeding tube at the care facility, the whole facility was there for that, and they were so upset, of course, because he was their favorite one, and had been for a long time. He made such an impact on them too, not just on me. So he passed while he was sleeping. He did wake up after they pulled the feeding tube, and that happens. Sometimes when somebody's about to die, they'll wake up and they'll be lucid and hold conversations with you as if there was nothing wrong, and then they will pass shortly after. And that's basically what happened with Lowell. So he made it to 78. And we thought he was going to die in his 60s because of this. But we got him to 78, and I think, all things considered, the work that we had to do to keep him going, that it was a good job done. And I'm really sad now. It's hard on me to not have him, because he was always a source of good information, even towards the end. The things he could tell me that he didn't tell me before, I always appreciated. Yeah, he was a very, very smart individual and had a lot of knowledge that he took with him that he wasn't able to actually share. But he did his best to share what he could. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, I miss this guy so much. And I'm really grateful for the time that I had with him. 40 years, 45 years. And I never would have imagined at 15 that Lowell Eriksen would have turned into the man that he was in his later years. You know, or that really because in the beginning I didn't see what he really was at the core of him. So, you know,
He was like a father.
he was like a father to me, but it wasn't just to me. He was a 5th grade school teacher. And that's a calling. You know, there's no money in that. He could have done a lot of things. Smart guy. He didn't get his PhD because he didn't want to write the thesis. And he had enough education to probably get 2. But he didn't want to do that. You know, continuing education for teachers, and he always went to the extreme for that. So he had a lot of education, and he was a very smart man, but hard to deal with to his face unless you knew him well. And I feel like I got the best of him, and I'm just grateful, and I will never forget that. So I hope you guys take that, you know, and now have a better understanding of who this guy was. And I know he didn't really touch you guys so much as he did me, but that's the reason why I'm here, because he did deliver, you know, in ways that I never would have expected. And I do my best now to emulate that, you know, to deliver the same kind of positive help to the people that really need it the most in everything that I do. And, you know, maybe someday someone will say the same thing about me, but that was Lowell Eriksen. Thanks for listening to that.
Playing it forward and playing it forward.
I do, yeah, I do, I will.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And now that I'm done talking, Pam, I'm gonna eat. I'm gonna turn off the camera. Yeah, it's been on this whole time.
Bye, Pammy. Bye, Booly.
Where's she at?
She's right here.
The camera right there.
Oh, really?